Hey, everybody. My name is Justin Barad. Thanks for having me. I started out life wanting to get into game development, but some illness in my family, sorry to go dark on you, got me interested in medicine and how to use software and technology to help people. So I ended up going to medical school to understand what sort of problems are facing patients and providers that we can solve with technology. And it was on my path to become an orthopedic surgeon that I discovered what might be the biggest problem, and that's how we train surgeons. So there's an expression we use in medicine, and it's called see one, do one, teach one. It's taken very literally, and this is the foundation of how we are trained. Hasn't changed in over 100 years. And what you basically do is you follow other surgeons around and watch them operate. 5 to 7 years later, you're done. That's about it. You're not going to want to get surgery at the end of this talk. This model isn't working too well anymore. The reason is, every year, there's more we need to learn. New technology, new knowledge, new procedures, and there's actually less time to learn it. Electronic medical record systems, changes in the way we view residents and culture, and work hour restrictions. For example, residents are now only allowed to work 80 hours a week, those lazy bums. So the result is we have undertrained surgeons. So this is a sight I saw very commonly in my practice. This is an actual picture of a surgery where two very well-respected surgeons have an instruction manual folded out on a patient as they operate. Just take it in. I would often be asked to scrub out, so that means degowning, running to the computer and Google what we were doing because no one knew what was going on. Pretty much weekly. I told you, I wasn't lying. A study that was very comprehensive showed that at the end of graduation, this is 4 years of medical school, 5 to 7 years of clinical training, about 30% of residents were still unable to operate on their own. The conclusion of this study is that our residency system as we know it is no longer working. Not only that, but we're going to be 50,000 surgeons short within a few decades. It gets more positive, I promise. And then there's this situation. Sometimes you just don't know what's going to come through the door. So one day we received a phone call from the zoo that there was a gorilla that was injured. And as we're driving over, we're all wondering why a bunch of surgeons that treat humans, pretty typically, are about to operate on a gorilla. But the procedure was life-threatening, but everyone did well. Come up to me afterwards, I'll tell you all the detail, and I have more pictures. They're really cool. But after this case, I wish that there was a way to practice for these things that come in a way that was just in time, that you just didn't know what was coming. So I had this background in game development. VR just had a renaissance, and I was facing the biggest problem that's facing our society today in terms of healthcare. And so I founded Osso VR with Matt Newport, who's a professional game developer. And our goal is to improve patient outcomes by increasing the adoption of modern surgical procedures and technologies, and also democratizing access to these advanced surgical techniques around the world. Osso VR is a hands-on surgical training platform. It could be used anytime and anywhere to practice surgery in a realistic manner. Let's see if I could show you guys a video. It's always a risk. I'm going to get the 5-minute rule. What do you think? Go for it or no?
Do you know the URL?
No, just let's go back to the presentation. It's VR. It's pretty cool.
I know, but this is going to go somewhere bad really fast.
Don't do it. Don't do it. All right. No, we're good. We're good. I'll show you later. Come up, gorilla pictures and VR videos, I promise. So for the first time ever, we're able to actually assess the technical skill of our surgeons. So think about it. When I interviewed for residency, do you know how they tested me? They had me play the game Operation. And what I did is I just turned it upside down and shook all the pieces out. That was like the clever way to win. I heard one person just took the batteries out so it didn't buzz. But there's seriously at no point in your surgical interview process, your training, or when you're out in practice, are you ever actually assessed for your technical skills. Unlike aviation, where every year they have to retest in the simulator. So we allow that functionality. Up until now, we've been focusing on surgeon training, but that's like having a football team and only sending your quarterback to practice while everyone stays home until game day. So with virtual reality, you can have people practice in the same virtual environment as a team wherever they are in the world. Osso VR is being used across the US and across the globe today. Does it work? In a clinical study we did at UCLA, it showed that people trained with Osso VR performed twice as well as non-VR trained individuals. I can talk about haptics later, but we're very interested in this topic, and there's a lot of interesting research on it. Our team is made up of professional game developers and clinical experts, and we've been featured in a lot of cool publications, and what we're most proud of is we were selected by the U.S. Department of Education as the #1 technical training company in the country. So I'll open the floor to questions, but thank you so much for having us up here. So, a big part, we're very excited about haptics and finger tracking in the future, but where we were coming from is an older generation of force feedback technology where actually the data shows that it didn't improve skill transfer at all and actually led to a decreased user experience, much like the rumble pack in your N64. So, I had this experience where I wanted this, when I was first coming up with the concept, I'm like, we need the best haptics out there. So what has really good force feedback? The Da Vinci surgical robot. Have you guys heard of this thing? It's everywhere. You can peel a grape. You can take out a prostate. So I found one. I don't. Sometimes you don't know which one's which. And so I'm sitting.
Dr. Humor at New Tech.
So I'm sitting at this thing, and I turned to the rep there, and I'm like, the haptics on this are incredible. And he looked at me. He goes, "Oh, there are no haptics on the Da Vinci." And I was like, "No." And I went back, and I still couldn't tell. It felt good. And so what our brains do is something called synesthesia, or sense substitution, where it actually fills in the gaps of deficient sensory input if the other senses are high enough quality. So we actually saw this when we rolled out early versions of our technology, where we have this thing where you're hammering this titanium rod in the leg, and we have simulated blood. It's so cool. But people would turn to me and go, "Oh man, that hammering felt so good. The way to go on the haptics." I'm like, "Ooh, yeah, we didn't do that yet." And so we have it now, but we're really just starting to understand, like, our brains, kind of how to trick it into really being immersive. And the stuff they're doing at haptics, that tactile component is something that's never really been done before, and I think that's going to make a big difference. In terms of, like, want to get into surgery, or? You mean like Ender's Game? Like, kind of like, you that was a real patient. I actually think that's a good thing. To give you an example, in my field of orthopedic surgery, in about 2014, something like 4% of orthopedic surgeons were women, which is an insanely small number. And there are studies that show that if you expose people earlier in life to fields like orthopedic surgery, they're more likely to apply and get into it. And so the work that we did with the U.S. Department of Education was career exploration with this technology. By exposing people to careers they wouldn't have thought that they were capable of, or that they wouldn't have seen around themselves, but to know that they have what it takes to do it, or that they would be interested because it's fun, because surgery is actually fun. And so learning to do it should be too.
All right,
especially when power tools are involved.
Put your hands together for Osso VR.